How's it going, guys? It's Eclipse here, and today we're taking a look at the Tier 8 heavy tank from the American line, the T34. I've recently 3-marked it. In fact, this is the 3-mark gameplay. Managed to do really well in it. It's not my best ever game. I have showed that recently in one of the highlight videos, and where I got like 5.3k damage or something like that in the T34, which is actually really good considering the amount of DPM this tank actually gets, which is really low. It only has a fire rate of 4 rounds a minute with 400 alpha, so you've only got 1600 DPM, which is pretty shocking for a tier 8 tank, let alone tier 8 heavy, etc. I mean, yeah, they tend to have the worst DPM, but it's generally terrible. So yeah, that's the main problem with this tank. That and the lack of hull armor. It really just gets the T29 hull, which is pretty terrible. You know, it's got a stronger turret. Don't get me wrong. It's the same turret as the T30 gets, but it does have that awful weak point on the top where people can pen it through the that like knobbly bit at the top of the turret just before the cupola, and also through the cupola. It is really weak. And also if you're coming up against tier 10s, which you can do in this tank, it's not a preferential, although this is +1 -1 matchmaking this week. They can pen straight through the top of you if they overmatch, because I believe it's only 30mm of armour or something like that on the upper bit further back on the turret. So yeah, you're not going to be bouncing very many Death Stars and stuff like that, because they'll just go straight through the turret. So that's something you need to be careful. That's why side scraping in this tank, and also using your gun depression, which is, I believe, 10 degrees, which is fantastic for a heavy tank. Usually, you know, you're looking in the range of 6, something like that for heavy tanks, depending obviously on what nation you are. You've got really good accuracy on this, and the dispersion whilst moving is actually fantastic because you are really slow. You've only got a top speed forward of something like 35 kilometers an hour. So yeah, you're not going to be moving or getting into position very fast. But the one good thing is, because of the lack of DPM, in order to balance it, I'm guessing, is that Wargaming actually managed to give it really good penetration. So you've got 248 millimeters of penetration on your standard rounds, which is more than enough to go through tier 8s, tier 9s, and most tier 10s as well. And the premium rounds also getting 297 millimeters of penetration, which is fantastic. You're basically, with almost 300 millimeters, you will go through everything that you come up against, basically, so you don't have to worry about that. You get 1500 hit points, which is, you know, it's pretty standard. It's around that for tier 8 heavies. You're huge though, so you do get hit if you're out in the open. On a map like Malinovka, you're exactly what artillery wants, so you want to keep yourself, well, try and keep yourself in artillery cover, although, you know, you've still got to push to get damage, because if you commit yourself to the wrong flank in the T34, you're basically left hung out to dry. You're not going to be able to relocate. You haven't got the speed for that, and you also don't have the DPM to recover the amount of damage that you might have lost because you were in the wrong position, just because, you know, you're not going to be able to shoot as fast. So what I'd recommend in this sort of tank is anything that improves your loading time of your gun, and I wouldn't necessarily go for gun handling stuff, because the gun handling of this tank is fantastic, but I would 100% go for anything that increases your horsepower. I mean, it might even be worth using the consumable that increases your horsepower. I think it's like enhanced fuel or something like that. I mean, it's an option. I've never used it, but then again, this is I've only played this tank a handful of times since update 6.0, and so yeah, it's really just a case of personal preference. I mean, I use food just to get the reload down, but then again, if you get into position faster, you might be able to get more shots, so it's a bit of a trade-off. It's kind of whichever you really want. Now getting into the gameplay, we've got into this position here. We've used our turret armour, as I talked about, being really strong at tier 8 anyway, and just been able to put ourselves in a position where we can use the strengths of this tank, which is obviously the turret armour and also the really high pen. So, you know, if you're facing other tier 8 heavies, you're probably going to be able to go through their turrets with your standard rounds or your premium rounds as well. And this is the point where you need to push now, because I've understand that, you know, it's a 50-50 game and you don't know which way it's going to go, and in order for me to ensure that I get at least some damage, I need to push up into, you know, an opponent or opponents to be able to increase my damage, because at the moment I'm only sitting on 1500, which is not enough to go up on my marks percentage. We have a terribly aim shot there on the huntsman. That was just my error. Would have been able to get another shot of damage in there, like actually penetrating damage. Unfortunately, we only critically damaged him there. So at this point, we're just continuing up the hill and getting some shots as and when we can, if possible. So you can see here that my bloom, when I'm actually moving, as you see just right there, is that it barely blooms out when you're on the move, and that's because you're just so slow. So that's one benefit, I'd say, is that for players that, you know, they're not necessarily that good at aiming on the move at tanks using the third party and stuff, when you get up close, you're going to be able to actually hit on the move. And also taking shots where you auto aim on the move is actually not that bad in this tank. I mean, it's obviously better to aim, but if you're in a clutch situation where you just have to shoot whilst you're on the move and whilst you're getting into cover, and it's just a secondary benefit if you actually be able to pen them, then definitely auto aiming with this tank with premium ammunition when you're trying to get into that cover spot is something you can do really easily, and 9 times out of 10 you can actually do it. Now getting back to the game, so at this point I know that there's probably a lot of TDs. There's an ISU 152 which I believe is in front of me at this point in the game. We're going to try and spot here, which is difficult in this tank since it only gets 380 meters of vision, which is actually really good for a tier 8 heavy, but it's still going to be outspotted by certain things, especially if they're using camo and stuff like that. And also because of its terrible concealment of 0.07, you're basically going to get spotted if the enemy has better concealment than you. And so you can see what I'm doing here. I'm only being able to show my turret really quickly, and because of the accuracy on the move and when you're moving being so good, is that I can literally just pull around the corner, shoot, and then I'm done. I don't have to sit there for a little bit to wait for my bloom to come down to be able to shoot. We get decent accuracy when we just poke shot and deal some damage. And so yeah, at this point it's literally a case of just farming the tanks that generally can't pen us in this sort of position. We understand that obviously artillery's going to hit us, and because we got spotted there, I knew that someone was looking at us, and it was most likely the ISU back in that bush. So we take a shot at him and manage to pen. So that's something you need to take note of. That's what's good about Sixth Sense, is that if it goes off and you weren't detected, it's probably because someone has come around that corner, if that makes sense. And as you can see, we took use of the auto aim. So when someone comes around that corner, you know, your Sixth Sense goes off, you know that it's probably that corner that spotted you, if you're not in a position where, you know, you wouldn't spot them. So in that position on this corner, if I was to push around to the right, I would spot anyone that was close enough to spot me back. So the only position that I would be able to get spotted by is anything right of that church. So, you know, the biggest probability is that they're going to be there. So that's my logic in games, is using any bit of information that I've got, and you know, I got an extra shot of damage there that I wouldn't necessarily have got otherwise if I didn't know that. Good thing here we put down the Centurion there, or the Huntsman Centurion, and yeah, we're in a position now where it's looking really good. So at this point there's 4 tanks left on the enemy team. I'm very confident. We're still on pretty much full health. We've only been hit by splashes from the artillery. We take a shot on the move, it hits but it doesn't pen, which I was really actually surprised about, considering the 300 nigh on 300mm of pen this tank gets, and also that being a Draugen. Yeah, I was surprised by that, but you know, it doesn't matter that much. He's going to try and run away, as you can see, and we use the on the move aim in first person view and shut him down right there. We spot the heavy tank there, the bear, and we're going to do the exact same thing to him. There we go, shut him down, and at this point we're just getting bombarded by artillery here, who obviously are going to go for the person furthest forward. So as you can see, this tank is good if you get it in a position where you can constantly shoot, as we've had in the last half of this game, against opponents that aren't in positions where they can get your hull armor. If they can, then you really don't have a great position. You need to really work yourself into positions such as on Himmelsdorf, using the things that hide your lower plate and also your upper plate, because realistically any tank's going to go through both of those. As you can see, we've got a mastery badge and the 3 mark high caliber sniper medal, I think, fire for effect and bruiser. So yeah, a really good game for this tank, especially since the DPM, you know, being so low, is really not that great. So I just thought this might have highlighted a couple of things that you can maybe learn for your heavy tanks, especially the American ones. I know that obviously the T34 and also the E5 and stuff, they all have very similar characteristics that you can transfer over between the different tanks. And yeah, same with the T29. If you keep yourself hold down, that's where the American heavy tanks do really well. So I hope that somewhat gave you some idea as to how good the T34 is, and you know, I wouldn't recommend it for any new players. It's not a particularly fun tank for those players that haven't really learnt the game that well. They don't know the weak spots and stuff like that. I mean, the penetration makes up for that, but if you're coming up against higher tier tanks in this, you really do get demolished, considering they will pretty much have you know, the same amount of alpha but deal their damage to you probably on average 30-40% faster. So you're really not going to be trading well, especially yeah, it's not a great tank, and I would recommend it as a bit of fun, and if you can pick it up for really cheap. But because its original price in gold is actually 12,000, I doubt that that's going to be fairly likely, and I would I'd rather play something with a bit more of a kick, like you know, recommending a defender to someone like that. Although I like a bit of a challenge, I like being able to use the different tanks in the game, and that's why I like the T34 the most as my tier 8 heavy tank. So I hope you guys enjoyed, I hope you found it informative, and if you want to see some of the other videos that I've done on my channel, and also some extra news videos, etc., reviews, then make sure to check that out in the description, where I'll leave a couple of video playlists and stuff like that you can have a look, and hopefully you enjoy those too. Anyway guys, hope you have a good rest of your day, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.